Chapter 14 of Building a Railroad by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14. The Proposition Jim Kelso Made to Andrew Newman. I tell you, Jim, that you've not only ruined yourself, but you've muddled up all my plans by your mad break against the life of Donald Winthrop at the quarry, Andrew Newman was saying in a tone of plain dissatisfaction. What in thunder have you got against the boy that you can run such a desperate risk in order to gratify your personal animosity? I hate him, hissed Kelso vindictively. Well, I know you've had it in for him ever since he struck that boy of yours. Hittin' Jerry ain't got nothing to do with it. No? Said Newman, blinking at his late foreman curiously. You spoke once as if you had your knife into him for that. Well, I did. But it was on account of that gal of mine, said Kelso doggedly. What about the girl? He was not trying to make love to her, was he? Grinned the contractor tantalizingly. I shouldn't imagine a chap like Winthrop had any time to waste over a blind girl. It don't make no difference whether he had the time or not. He made it his business to interest himself too all-fired much in her to suit me, snarled Kelso. How was that? After that first time he butted in between her and Jerry, he came up to my place and wanted to see her. But my old woman set him about his business without much ceremony, you bet your life. And the speaker grinned malevolently. But after he got started grading the road, I saw him several times nosing around the foot of the cliff about where the tunnel opening is now. I reckon he was trying to get sight of the gal, but the old woman would let her outside. One afternoon, the gal gave her the slip somehow, for I catched her talking to him down near the water. I sneaked up behind him and heard something of what he was saying. I had an idea she might have heard me tell the old woman what I intended to do again the new railroad, and that she would put him on his guard. But it appears he was trying to get her to give us the shake, which she knows better than to do. And finally, he tried to make her tell him what sort of hold I had upon her. Then you have a hold on the girl, eh? Said Newman with some interest. I always thought there was something queer about the connection with you. Besides, I couldn't understand why you wanted a blind girl around your premises anyway. It doesn't make no difference whether I got a hold on her or not, or why I kept her around. That's my affair. And I wasn't going to have this pesky young contractor poking around trying to find out what didn't concern him. You were afraid he might learn something about the girl which would upset your calculations, is that it? Asked the contractor shrewdly. It's about the ticket if you want to know, admitted Kelso surlily. He didn't learn anything, did he? No, he didn't. I told him to git, and if he'd done it and let the gal alone after that, I reckon I shouldn't have tried to do him up. It ended up in a scrap, and he laid me out. Laid you out? Said Andrew Newman in amazement. You mean to say that boy whipped you with his fists? That's what he did. He's been and took lessons from some prize fighter, for I couldn't reach him nohow. You'd have thought I was a chicken in the way he handled me, and that's why I hate him. He's the first fellow that ever got the best of me, and I sworn to settle him for it. And you've put yourself into a nice hole trying to do it, haven't you? I'll reach him yet, gritted the rascal. I think you've done damage enough, both to yourself and me, by your recklessness. You want to get out of the state just as soon as you can, or you'll land behind the bars before you're many hours older. Don't you worry yourself about me, Mr. Newman, said the rascal with a hoarse chuckle. I can look out for myself. I reckon I fooled the police these 3 months. I haven't been out of sight of my house the whole time they was hunting for me. They ain't going to get me so easy as you think. Well, you know your business. You sent for me to come out here to see you. I suppose you want money. I brought you $100. I want a good deal more than $100, said Kelso as he accepted the money. But I stand ready to earn it. What do you mean by that? You said a while ago that the quarry affair had blocked your schemes for doing up their railroad contract. I did. I depended entirely upon you to queer them one way or another. Your recklessness simply killed my chances. Maybe you did, and maybe you didn't, retorted Kelso doggedly. They haven't finished the work yet." "Well, it looks mighty like they were going to finish it on time," said the contractor gloomily. "I had no idea those boys had it in 'em. Maybe you'll remember I told you one day, just afore they begun the job, that if you expected to do 'em up, you'd have to get right down to business. You see, I was right, don't you?" "I'm not denying but they surprised me," admitted the contractor. "But if you would simply look strictly after my interests, instead of yielding to an insane temptation to do up Donald Winthrop on your own account, it is not unlikely I should have been able to put a spoke in the railroad contract." "I reckon I see a way to put a mighty big spoke in it yet," said Kelso grimly. "In what way?" asked Andrew Newman with a sudden show of interest. "What are you willing to stand if I put it through?" "How can you do anything that'll interfere with the building of the line now? You're a marked man, certain to be arrested on sight," answered Andrew Newman incredulously. "That ain't got nothing to do with it," said Jim Kelso, wagging his head confidently. "I've got a plan, and I mean business. I haven't been asleep while I've been under cover. Tell me what your scheme is, and if I see anything in it, I'll agree to pay you every cent it's worth to me." "Will you? Well, it's easily worth $5,000 to you. That's a good deal of money, Jim. Isn't it worth that to bust this new firm up and drive 'em out of business, these diggins?" "Will this plan of yours, if successful, have that effect?" asked the contractor, growing interested in the proposition of his late foreman. "It'll go a long way toward it, I reckon." "Let's hear what it is, and then I'll be able to judge of its value." "Suppose something happened to that tunnel they're boring through their cliff. More'n half the masonry is already in place. Wouldn't it kind of upset the time calculations of them boys?" "Do you mean to say that you can destroy the work in that tunnel as it stands?" asked Andrew Newman doubtfully. "That's just what I mean." "How are you going to manage it?" asked Mr. Newman in some excitement. "That's my business. If you'll agree to pay me $5,000 when the job is done, I'll put it through." "Of course you couldn't do any such thing without a lot of dynamite. Where do you expect to get it?" "You're asking too many questions, Mr. Newman," said Kelso impatiently. "If you want the job done, say so." "Well, if the work were thoroughly done, it would certainly cripple the Winthrops to a considerable extent," muttered the big contractor, with some eagerness of his manner. "As this is their first big contract, it would hurt their reputation, I guess. It might even prevent them from finishing the work within the time. At any rate, it would mean a big loss to them, and it might leave me a clear field to scoop in the contract for the trolley line between Lakeview and Greenville, for which bids will soon be asked." Andrew Newman was hot after the contract to build the trolley road in question, and it was no secret that the Winthrops would bid against him when the time came. Under these circumstances, he could easily afford to throw away $5,000 if he could thereby eliminate them from the field. "Well, Jim, you go ahead and see what you can do. If you can make good in a way that'll prove to be to my advantage, I'll see that you get that $5,000. I guess it'll be worth that to me." "Get your $5,000 ready, for the job will be finished before morning." "You really mean that, Jim? Did you ever know me to say what I didn't mean?" "Very well. I'll get back to town now. As soon as I learn that you have accomplished the work, the money will be at your disposal." "I'll call for it myself tomorrow night at your house. Be on the watch for me." Andrew Newman stared at his former foreman. The fellow's assurance was amazing. "You seem to be certain of success," he said. "I reckon I am," replied Kelso as he took up the lantern and started to lead the contractor from the scene of the confab. End of chapter 14.